Hello, my name is Ryan. I'm the student pastor here at Beach. We are in week 4 of a series called Future Past. And basically the whole idea behind this series is that what we do today will change our future, either for the better or for the worse. And furthermore, not only are we talking about just the future, but the decisions we make today and even in the future years, those things will one day be in our rear view mirror. They will one day be in our past, and we'll have a story to tell, and we can choose what story we want to tell. We can choose the legacy we want to leave. But in order to do that, we have to start now. We have to start today to change our future. We're talking about a guy today by the name of Josiah. Everybody say Josiah. Josiah was a king of Judah, and he's not necessarily the king that comes to your mind off the top of your head for God's people. You think of David, you think of Solomon, that kind of stuff. But Josiah was one of the great kings in the history of God's people. And he speaks a lot to us about what it means to make decisions today that will change our future. And I love Josiah. Like, he's always been one of my favorite people. And you may not even know him unless you grew up in church or have read the Old Testament a few times. But like, he's a great example to look at. And I love him because when I was younger, I was in an elite theatrical company known as the church choir, the children's church choir, in fact. And we had an annual musical, which was really just an excuse for parents to get together and take pictures. But it was before social media, so why did you even take pictures? And so the parents would come around, and we'd have this little theater production. And we one time did the story of Josiah, and I got the lead role, and I was little King Josiah. And a lot of people think, we know about Lindsay Sweat and Ashley Sweat. We know they sing, they lead worship and write music and all that kind of stuff. And my mom was a major in music, and my dad gets up here and sings like Christmas carols and stuff. But I too can sing. And in my young prepubescent voice, I had 2 solos in the church musical. And I'm going to sing you a little piece of it. Here we go. Make me a servant, humble and meek. Lord, let me lift up those who are weak. Can you imagine it? Little Ryan just playing King Josiah, singing that cute little solo. It was amazing. So I've always loved Josiah. And as we look at his story today, I want you to ask yourself a question. We're going to look at this question throughout the day. And here it is. What is your future worth? What is your future worth? And let me tell you, this may not feel like the most encouraging message, but if you take action, it will change your future. What is your future worth? And the reason why we have to ask this question is because we control our future in a lot of ways, whether we want to admit it or not. A lot of times we get into situations and we're like, why did God do that? Why did the universe do that? And it's really like, no, dude, you did it. You did it. You made decisions along the way that got you to this point. And here's kind of the idea behind this, is that there are areas in all of our lives, no matter what race you are, whether you're old, young, rich, poor, whether you are a Christian or not, there are areas in all of our lives that have the potential to ruin, not just mess up a little bit, not just kind of disrupt, but ruin our future if we don't address them now, today. And let me tell you, this isn't a message for the young people who got a lot of years in front of them. This is a message for all of us. We all have areas in our life right now, no matter how mature we are, no matter how much we've been through, that have the potential to ruin our future and the future of those around us if we don't address them now. But before I get to Josiah, let me give you a little background of where he was. God entered into a covenant, into a relationship with the people known as the Israelites. He led them out of Egypt. Moses led them in the desert, and he gave them a law, a covenant. And here's what the covenant essentially said. If you follow me, if you obey me, then I will prosper you. Like physically prosper you. I will give you a great nation. I will give you money. I will give you wealth. I will give you fame. I will give you victory over your opponents. Like, life will be good if you obey me. So this covenant was made between God and a specific group of people known as the Jewish people, the Israelites. And here was the problem. They didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And so many times they were not prospered. In those few times where they would obey God, he would come through on his promises, but it was an if-then, like if they obeyed and they did not obey, and things did not go so well. And they got kings, and the first couple were good, Saul was okay. David's like the great king of Israel. His son Solomon, we all love Solomon. He's got all the wisdom. So they were 2 for 3, feeling pretty good about themselves. But then Solomon's son came along. And Solomon's son was not as wise as his daddy. He made a mistake. Within a week of becoming the ruler of Israel, he has this united kingdom, and he got everybody angry. He basically told them, I don't care about you. I'm going to do whatever I want, and you're going to be my servants. And they were like, okay, all right. Well, then we are going to leave your nation. And so the nation was divided. It was divided between the south and the north. We know a little bit about that in our history. The south was separated from the north. They were called Judah. The north was called Israel. And so for the next few hundred years, they would only have 2 individual kingdoms. They were both following God, kind of in a way, but they were divided as a group of people. They had their own kings, their own governments, all of that kind of thing. And over the next few hundred years, they had 38 combined kings, 38 combined kings. And out of those 38, you could count how many were good on one hand. You could count how many honored God on one hand. Most of them were wicked, wicked, wicked men who did not care one iota about God's covenant with the people of Israel. And so they just did what they wanted. And things didn't go well for them. In 722, the kingdom of Israel is conquered by Assyria and carried off into exile, leaving only this small nation of Judah. And we find this nation of Judah continuing in turmoil. And their day was coming. They would be carried off into exile by the Babylonians a few hundred years later. But in 640 BC, a young man named Josiah takes over the kingdom of Judah, all that's left of God's people. And he was in a very difficult spot. But it was made even more difficult by the fact that he was 8 years old. 8 years old. I want you to remember where you were when you were 8 years old. A third grader or second grader. What were your values when you were 8 years old? What did you want when you were 8 years old? What would you do if you got $100 in your pocket when you were 8 years old? What would you say when you were 8 years old? He was running the nation of Judah. And again, they were in a bad spot because his daddy and his granddaddy were terrible, terrible, terrible kings. His granddaddy's name was Manasseh, and Manasseh, he was just all over the place. He didn't care about God at all. He built altars to other gods. He worshiped other gods. He built altars to other gods in the temple of God. Next to the Holy of Holies were just all these other gods from foreign kingdoms. And he worshiped the stars, and he sacrificed one of his children to a foreign idol in the fire. He was like a psychopath. He practiced sorcery. He had fortune tellers. He killed so many prophets and godly people that the Old Testament says that from one side of Jerusalem to the other, it was covered in the blood of the holy people. Why did he kill them? Because they didn't agree with him. Because he didn't want anybody saying, you're not doing the right thing. So he would just kill them. And they couldn't get rid of Manasseh because he just wouldn't die. He reigned for 55 years. And so then his son takes over, Amon. And Amon was just as bad. But they said, we're not going to let you rule for 55 years. So they assassinated him after 2 years. Imagine being so bad you get assassinated after 2 years. And not by some religious zealot running around saying, you need to honor God. He was killed by his own people. He was killed by his own cabinet, his own officials, his own assistants. And so he dies, and these people are basically saying, we'd rather have an 8-year-old run our kingdom than you. So into the spotlight, Josiah steps. He's 8 years old. He's had terrible influences his entire life that he can remember. He's in this nation that's surrounded by their enemies, that is in complete turmoil, not obedient to God at all. And this is where Josiah's story starts. But before we start his story, let me ask you, what's your future worth? What's your future worth? 2 Chronicles chapter 34, verse 1. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 31 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and followed in the ways of his father or his ancestor David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. In the 8th year of his reign, he's 16, he's a sophomore in high school. While he was still young, he began to seek the Lord, and began to seek the God of his father David. So he enters into a relationship with God. And then in his 12th year, he's 20 years old, he's in his second year of college or third year of college, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of the high places, the Asherah poles and the idols. He begins to get rid of some of the things that have been put into place. And then he looks at the temple, this temple that was built in beauty by Solomon and dreamed up by King David. And he looks at it and he's like, man, this is like a pile of rubble. It looks terrible. It had been stripped of its glory and its beauty. And he said, we are going to change this. We are going to value God. And so what he does is he starts collecting all of the offerings and some taxes. And he goes to his officials. He says, take this money, hire a bunch of people, and make this thing amazing. Make this thing amazing. And so they go and they start working on it. But in the construction, they find something. As they're cleaning out one of the back storage rooms, cleaning up underneath some tables and furniture, they find a book. But not just any book. They find the book of the covenant, the book of the law that God had given to Moses. Moses had written the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. This shows how bad the people of God were going. They didn't even have a copy of the scripture. Not even the priest had a copy of the scripture. And we don't know how it ended up there. Perhaps it's because the former kings had been going around and burning the Bible and burning it so that nobody would know what they were doing was evil. Maybe someone hid it away just to keep one copy alive. Perhaps they just got so bored and complacent with God that they just threw it in a back room to collect dust for as long as it was there. But whatever the case, they find it. They dust it off and they take it to the king. We're going to pick up in verse 18. It says, then Shaphan, the secretary, informed the king, Hilkiah the priest has given me a book. Shaphan read from it in the presence of the king. He read the promises. He read what would happen if they didn't obey. He read all the 600 laws. And when the king heard the words of the law, he tore his robes. He was in agony. He was devastated by the fact that he was the leader of a nation that had completely broken their covenant with God. And he heard the things that were going to happen to the people. And he even though he had been following God, he had never heard these words. He had never seen the words of God. And so he was devastated. And so immediately he sends orders to his officials. And he says, go and inquire of the Lord for me and the remnant in Israel, that's the people left after they were conquered by Assyria, and Judah about what is written in this book that has been found. Great is the Lord's anger that is poured out on us, because those who have gone before us have not kept the word of the Lord. They have not acted in accordance with all that is written in this book. And so they go to this prophetess, this female prophet, and they ask her, what should we tell the king? And she says, go tell King Josiah this. God has seen your humility. God has seen the way you humbled yourself when you heard the law, when you tore your clothes and you cried out and you wept. God has seen it. And here's what he's going to do. He's going to delay the judgment on God's people until you die. You'll be buried in peace. So essentially, the promise to Josiah is, you're good, man. You're good for the rest of your life because of what you just did. And Josiah could have said, cool, I'm good then. I'm just going to go on living how I want to live, rule how I want to rule, because I can't change what's coming, but it's not going to happen in my lifetime, so I'm happy with that. He could have been selfish, but he cared more about the future of his nation and of the people around him and his families and his children than to just settle for that. So then he gathers together all of Judah around the temple. And he has the book of the law read to all the people, which, if you've ever read the first 5 books of the Bible, that would take a long, long time. And at the end, the people of Judah renew their covenant with God. They say, we're going to do this again. We are going to follow through. And he could have stopped there. Everybody was going home, walking home from worship that day, walking home from the temple through the streets of Jerusalem, saying, Josiah, he turned out to be pretty good, didn't he? He was 8 years old. I wasn't sure about him, and now he's 26, and that dude is killing it, man. I love this guy. He read the book of the covenant, man. This is awesome. It might have felt good. We sang some good songs. We heard a good word. Eat lunch, go home. But it all would have been a lie. Because as they were having that conversation and walking through the streets of Jerusalem, they would have been walking past shops selling idols. They would have been walking past people worshiping idols. They would have heard the sounds of children being sacrificed outside the city to foreign gods. They could have seen outside on the hills around Jerusalem smoke burning and worship in the high places and people committing the act of idolatry. Nothing would have been changed. Yeah, they would have had a nice little show, good little service. We all feel good, Go home and just live the same way, and the nation would not have changed a bit. And Josiah said, that's not enough. I care too much about my future to allow this to stay the same. He said there are areas in our nation that will ruin our future if we don't change them today. And so he did something drastic. And we can read about it in 2 Kings, chapter 23. He did something drastic. But before I get to what he did, let me ask you again. What is your future worth? What's your future worth? What's the future of your community, your family, your friends? What's it worth? Is it worth it to do something drastic today to change your future? To stop those things that have potential to cause you ruin? Verse 4, chapter 23. Here's what Josiah does. He ordered Hilkiah, the high priest, and the priests next in rank and the doorkeepers to remove from the temple of the Lord all the articles made for Baal and Asherah and all the starry hosts. This is how bad it had gotten. There was stuff in the temple for other gods. And he says, this is not enough. I'm going to start at the center of the problem, the temple in the middle of our capital city, and I am going to start removing some things. But you know what? A lot of kings had been removing idols throughout hundreds of years. They'd move them, put them somewhere in storage. And a couple kings later, a bad king would come along and he'd say, where are those idols? I want to start worshiping other gods. He'd pull them back out of storage and put them right back where they were. And Josiah said, I'm not going to let that happen. Not on my watch. And so he didn't just remove them. He then took them outside of Jerusalem and he burned them in the fields of the Kidron Valley. And he took the ashes to Bethel, which we don't know the geography, so that doesn't sound like much to us. But Bethel was outside of the border of Judah. Here's what Josiah is saying. He's like, I'm not even willing for the ashes of these idols to be in my borders. I am taking them outside of my nation. And then he continues, he did away with the idolatrous priests because he knew it's not just the things, it's the people. There are some influences in this nation that I have to fire, that I have to get rid of in order to continue following after God. And so he gets rid of the idolatrous priests, which had been, by the way, appointed by the kings of Judah, the ones that had been put in place to lead the people towards God. They had put these priests in place to worship idols. And he takes them and he fires them. They were there to burn incense on the high places of the towns of Judah and on those around Jerusalem. And they burned incense to Baal, to the sun, to the moon, to the constellations, and to all the starry hosts. And then he took the Asherah pole, which was this goddess, Asherah. He took the pole from the temple of the Lord to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem, and he burned it. But it wasn't good enough to just burn it. No, he went farther. He wasn't settling for just, I'm just going to try to put it over there. He burned it, and then he ground it to powder. Imagine how long it takes to grind something down that is this big, this huge statue or this huge monument, down to powder. And then he wasn't done there. He scattered it over the graves of common people, which we think that's offensive to the graves, but that wasn't what anyone thought. Because any contact with the dead in any religion, any pagan religion or the people of God, anywhere in the world at this time would know that putting something in contact with dead people desecrates that thing. And so what he was doing was saying, these gods are worthless and I'm going to put them on the graves of dead people so that everyone knows what I think of these gods. It was an insult to anybody who would follow after these gods, to any priest, to any person who had turned away from God to these idols. And then he goes back to the temple of the Lord. He tore down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes that were in the temple of the Lord. Yes, Prostitution going on in the temple, right outside the Holy of Holies. And not just any prostitution that was supposed to be some kind of worship of these other idols. He tears them all down, kicks them out. And he got rid of the quarters where the women did the weaving for Asherah, which can be taken in one of two ways. Either those weavings were to honor Asherah, the goddess, or they were weavings meant to hide the prostitutes in their own little cubicle to do their work behind closed doors. Whatever the case, he gets rid of them all. We jump down to verse 10. He desecrated Topheth, which was in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so that no one could use it to sacrifice their son or daughter in the fire to Molech, something his granddaddy had done to one of his kids. Josiah was like, we are not going to have any children sacrificed anymore. And so he tears down and desecrates this location where it had been going on for generations. Skip over to verse 15. Even at the altar at Bethel, remember, outside of his nation, not part of his jurisdiction, technically under Assyrian rule. So it's kind of maybe a little act of war to even go into their territory and do anything. But it was worth it to him. Even the altar at Bethel, the high place made by Jeroboam, who had caused Israel to sin, even that altar and high place, he demolished. But as you know, he didn't just demolish it. He burned it, he ground it to powder, and he burned the Asherah pole also. It's as if he was saying this, it's not enough to just get rid of everything in my nation. I've got to get rid of any foreign influence because I don't want my people in my nation looking across the border a couple miles away and seeing the temptation of a shrine or an idol temple. He said, so I'm going to go and I'm going to make them travel for weeks to be able to find this kind of foreign god worship, this idolatry. And so he tore down even the temples and the high places outside of his nation, all around, to protect the future of his people. Protect the future of his family. Skipping now to verse 19. Just as he had done at Bethel, Josiah removed all the shrines at the high places that the kings of Israel had built in the towns of Samaria and that had aroused the Lord's anger. Again, this is outside of his nation. He's going up into another nation to get rid of the high places that were done hundreds of years ago. They weren't his fault. They were done hundreds of years ago by other kings. All the way back to the time of Solomon were these shrines being built in the kingdom of Israel. And he goes and he tears them down. And this next part's gonna sound bad, but I want you to think about the heart behind it and how it applies to us. He slaughtered all the priests of these high places on the altars, and he burned human bones on them to desecrate them. Then he went back to Jerusalem. And we hear that and we're like, well, that's so violent. But here's what Josiah was saying. I'm not letting you guys do this again. I'm not going to trust that this isn't just going to happen again. I've read my history books. I know what's happened. I know what my granddaddy did. I know what my daddy did. I'm not going to let this happen on my watch. I care too much about the future of me and the people that I'm governing to allow this to continue. Then he goes to all the people and he says, celebrate the Passover to the Lord your God, as it is written in the book of the covenant. One of the most holy days in Judaism, the Passover, the celebration of them leaving Egypt, being set free, had been almost forgotten. It would be as if we just stopped celebrating Christmas or Easter in churches. This is what was going on in Judah. This is the depths to which they had fallen. And he says, I want you to do every single thing the book of the covenant says. Verse 22 says, neither in the days of the judges who led Israel, nor in the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah had any such Passover been observed. This was like a once in a lifetime, once in a nation Passover. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was celebrated to the Lord in Jerusalem, but he still wasn't done. He wasn't done. Furthermore, Josiah got rid of the mediums and the spiritists, the household gods, the idols, and all other detestable things seen in Judah and Jerusalem. This he did to fulfill the requirements of the law written in the book that Hilkiah the priest had discovered in the temple of the Lord. Neither before nor after Josiah was there a king like him. Neither before nor after was there a king like him who turned to the Lord as he did with all his heart, all his soul, and all his strength in accordance with the law of Moses. So once again, what's your future worth? What are the areas in your life that if you don't address them now will ruin your future and the future of those around you. Here's what King Josiah shows us. A young man, but very, very wise. Here's what he shows us. When removing temptations and distractions from our lives, we have to be ruthless, which is not a word you usually hear associated with Christians or with the way of Jesus. You have to be ruthless. You have to be ruthless with these distractions that keep you from God, these obstacles, these things in your life. You may even have to be ruthless. You could do it in a loving way, but be ruthless with who you allow into your life and who you'll allow yourself to be in relationships with. You have to be ruthless. You have to go above and beyond. You can't just settle for, I'm doing okay right now. You can't just settle for, I'm gonna try hard not to let that become a problem in the future. You can't just settle for, I'm gonna watch it, I'll watch my back, no, you have to go all in. Josiah was ruthless with the distractions that were coming against his people. And we may say, well, that doesn't sound like Jesus. Want to bet? Matthew 5, verse 29. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. Why? Because it's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And imagine your right hand causes you to stumble. Cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. What's Jesus saying? Is he encouraging us to walk around with no hands and no eyes? Is he encouraging us to self-mutilate? No. He's doing what most preachers do. He's exaggerating. He's telling them, listen. It's not worth it to allow these things into your life. It's not worth it. You need to do whatever it takes to get rid of it, to cast it out, to get it out of your life and your path. Do whatever it takes. And he's just like Josiah. Listen to what he says. He doesn't just say, gouge it out. I mean, that's enough, Jesus, right? Gouge out my eyes. It doesn't really work anymore, especially in first century Israel. I don't really have doctors to put it back in. Cut off your hand. Nobody can reattach it. That's enough, Jesus, right? No. Do that, but then I want you to throw it away. Let it go rot in the bushes somewhere. It is not going to allow you to keep on going the direction you're going. So once again, I ask you, what's your future worth to you? What's the future of your family worth to you? Where are the areas of your life that if you don't address them now, that if you don't cut them off and throw them away, that if you don't burn them, grind them up, and take them outside of your nation and your life circle, that they will ruin your life? What are those areas? What are those areas? Here's the question we're going to close with. What do you need to remove from your life now that will change your future? What do you need to remove from your life right now that will change your future? Maybe you struggle in the area of pornography and lust. We've seen the statistics. We know what the statistics are among Christians and non-Christians, guys and girls. And you say, I got it under control. I've got that part. It's just a stage I'm going through. I'm a teenager. Come on, man. Like, lay off. I'll stop that when I get married, will you? You know how addictions work? Oh, well, when it comes into the light and someone finds out, then I'll handle it. You really want to wait that long? You really want to put yourself in that position? I remember reading of a young man before phones and cell phones and computers. The temptation was the TV. And he said, I was struggling with lust. I was a single guy, and I thought, I can't have a TV in my house. So my friends thought I was stupid for throwing out my TV. But guess what? Years later, I never regretted not having a TV when I was in my 20s. I never looked back and said, man, I missed so many episodes. Oh, like it just ruined my life. No, he never said that. But you know what he would have said if he had kept it and given into lust and taken him down a path 20 years later? He would have said, why did I not make a change back then? Why did I not do something drastic? Maybe you're in this room and you got some lust-filled relationship or you're addicted to something, images on your computer, and you're just like, man, like I'm just gonna deal with it later. And there is no later. God's calling you right now for your benefit and the benefit of the people around you. Get rid of it, cast it out, cut it off, gouge it out, get rid of it. You say, well, that's just irrational. So, what's your future worth? Is it worth not having a computer? Is it worth having a flip phone? What's your future worth? Maybe your problem is addiction, maybe to a substance, a drink, a habit. You say, I'm going to handle that later. What's your future worth? Are you really? Are you really that strong enough? Do you trust yourself that much? Are you going to put all your chips into the middle of the table and say, my willpower's got it? How's that worked out for you in the past? How's that worked out for every other human on the face of the earth? It just doesn't. Are you willing to go get into an anonymous group? Are you willing to go into counseling? Are you willing to go into rehab? Are you willing to tell your family? Are you willing to start the intervention? Are you willing to do something drastic? And you say, well, that's just too much. That's legalistic. It's just wise. What's your future worth to you? You really want to go down that road? Or are you going to cut it off and gouge it out? Maybe you have this addiction or this problem with pride and ego, or maybe on the other side, you have this addiction to just hating yourself and looking at yourself like you're worthless. Maybe you just need to get rid of social media, because we know what happens. If we're prideful, we look at it and we're like, man, I'm so much better than them. They thought that vacation was cool. They think that outfit looks good. Come on, man. Like, look at my social media. I'm great. And then if it's the other side of the token, we look at everybody, we're looking at all the celebrities and all the famous people. We're like, man, I wish I could be like that. I wish I could look like them. I wish I could act like them. I wish I could dress like them. I wish I had that kind of money. I wish I had those relationships. And we're just beating ourselves down. Are you willing to get rid of social media? You willing to unsubscribe from some magazines? You willing to stop following some people that really just make you feel bad about yourself? I bet you in 20 years, you're not going to say, man, I should have stayed on Instagram. Oh. Like, how much did I miss out on in Facebook? Like, I didn't get to see so many political opinions. It was, what am I doing? Probably not. But I'll tell you what you will. You will appreciate yourself in the past. You'll say, I'm so glad that I nipped that in the bud, that I understood that pride or ego or my self-worth was worth more than social media, and that I had to make a change. And people around me thought I was stupid or being legalistic or like, well, you're so Christian. And I just knew I wanted my future to benefit. Maybe you're obsessed with stuff and money, and you've got to make some drastic changes to budget and giving and saving and getting rid of things and not taking so much in and consuming so much. Maybe you're looking at your relationship with God and you're like, I just wish I felt closer to God. Where is he? And God's like, I'm right here. I never left. Where you been? You're not listening. You're not praying. You're not reading. You're not serving. You're not going to church. You're not in community. You're not doing anything to do with the things of God. And you wonder why you feel so far. Maybe this isn't a guilt trip. This is just, do you want to change that? Then change it today. Start making some drastic decisions to say, I'm going to remove some things from my life. I'm going to start adding some good things to my life that will change the trajectory of my faith journey. And it might just change the trajectory of your children's faith journey, and your grandchildren's faith journey, and your neighbor's faith journey, and your coworker's faith journey. Because it's not just about our future. That's what Josiah understood, remember? Like, his future was secure as soon as he humbled himself. But he said, that's not enough. I'm taking back my nation for the people after me. I'm going to be ruthless with these things. So here's how we're going to respond. In front of you, there's note cards and there's pens. I want everybody to grab one. Whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're young, old, guy, girl, whatever. Even if you think there's nothing really in my life that I got to really worry about right now. Take it out. And here's what I want you to do. I just want you to write down. You can think about it for a moment. We'll have the band just play quietly. And I just want you to think for a moment. What are the one or two areas of my life that could cause ruin later? You might not even see them now. They're so under the surface. But later, they're going to come back to haunt you. Later, they could cause ruin if they're left unchecked. And then here's the next thing I want you to do. I want you to consider Josiah's example and consider Jesus' teaching. And I want you to write down the 1, 2, 3, maybe it's 10 things that you would need to do if you wanted to make sure that you completely eradicated it from your life, that it was no threat to you whatsoever. And if you're like, I don't know, this is too hard for me to do, I want you to imagine you were advising a friend on how to do that same thing, on how to get rid of it. I want you to write it down. I'm not asking you to do anything. But here's what I'm asking you to do. Just have it for a few days. Read it a few times. Maybe pray over it. Listen to God a little bit. I just wonder if maybe you write it down, that even when you're writing it down, it's painful. But over the next couple days, I just wonder if maybe you'll start to think, it'd be worth it though. You think Josiah was popular when he was crusading through the streets, tearing down every single thing that the people had grown to love? You think his approval ratings were high when that was happening? No. But he said, it's worth it. It's worth it for my future. It's worth it for my nation's future. It's worth it for my children's future. It's worth it for the future people that will come after me. What's your future worth? Take a moment and respond as the band is playing quietly. I'm going to pray over you, and then you guys just respond. Heavenly Father, Lord, give us the courage to be obedient. Just give us the courage to write something down. Give us the courage to write down some steps that we might take if we wanted to change things for good. Lord, we can't do this by our power. We can only do it by the guidance of you, by the guidance of your Holy Spirit. We're not good enough, but give us the steps we need to take to eradicate. Help us be ruthless with the areas, the places, the things, the temptations, even the relationships that are pulling us from you, that are leading us down a path we don't want to go down. What's our future worth? Lord, give us the courage. Give us the courage